Internet, Eric here. The new It movie, the Stephen King movie, comes out this weekend. And with it coming out this weekend and preparing to go see it this weekend, and I'm going to say it a lot, take a drink every time I say the word it, I decided to go back and revisit, rewatch, what have you, the 1990 TV miniseries of Stephen King's It. Directed by Tommy Lee Wallace. Tommy Lee Wallace worked on the first two Halloween films, and then he ended up directing Halloween 3, which I have defended in my You Hate It, I Don't series of videos. Feel free to check that out. If you're new to my channel, welcome. I discuss plot spoilers and specific scenes, but it's from 1990, and I have it on VHS still, so if it's old enough to be on VHS, you should have watched it by now, and instead of worrying about fucking spoilers. Okay. Let's see here. How do I go about this? Well, basic plot. Yeah. We start out in present day, and we're in Derry, Maine. Stephen King, everything's got to be in Maine. And Mike Hanlon, played by Tim Reed. If you're a 90s kid, he's from Sister Sister. Or he also, if you want to go a little more into the future, he was Hyde's dad on that 70s show. And he plays Mike Hanlon. And he's investigating, I mean, he's a librarian, but he's investigating a lot of child disappearances, child murders happening in the town. And he believes it is the work of this evil creature, played by Tim Curry, Pennywise the Clown, which I'll get into. And what he does is, he and a group of his friends defeated this creature 30 years ago. And they made a blood pact, or, well, in the book it's a blood pact. I've never read the book, but I know enough about it. They made a promise that, you know, they defeated it 30 years ago. They promised that if it ever came back, they would return to Derry to defeat it once and for all. So he gets on the phone, he calls up the rest of the group, the Losers Club as they called them when they were kids, and they return to Derry, and they band together however they can to defeat this supernatural creature. And that's it in a nutshell. I remember when this was on TV. I don't know if it was NBC or ABC or what have you. I think it was on like a Sunday. I mean, it was two parts. You know, it's 4 hours with commercials, but on VHS, I think it's 192 minutes, 20. So a little over 3 hours. And it was, to my knowledge, it was a big ratings hit. And Tim Curry, you know, if he's not thought about as Dr. Frankenfurter when you ask about who you remember Tim Curry as, it's usually Pennywise the Clown. It helped, I believe, this miniseries made it, the novel, more popular than Stephen King could have ever imagined. Now, like I said, it was on 1 week, and then the following week it came out. So it's basically two 90-minute films put together. And I don't know how I'm going to review this. Unless maybe I'll discuss part 1 and then part 2. Well, part 1, like I said, Mike is calling up all of his friends, his former friends. And what I like is every time he calls up, let's just say he calls up Bill. Bill is the leader. He's played by Henry Thomas. Calls up Bill. And then we get Bill's backstory while he's remembering everything that happened. And then we go to the past. It's 1960. And Jonathan Brandis plays young Bill. And we learn about, you know, how he's got to deal with his brother's death. You know, brother Georgie was one of the first victims of Pennywise. Calls up Beverly, played by Annette O'Toole. And of course we meet, you know, we learn her backstory where, you know, she's from Poor Town, you know, the poor part, the projects of Derry, and, you know, her abusive and overprotective father, and then on and on and on. You know, John Ritter and Richard Mazer and Harry Anderson from Night Court, and then I have no idea who plays Eddie. But we learn all of their backstories. Like, you know, John Ritter plays Ben. He was the fat kid that was always picked on. Whoever played Eddie. Eddie was a hypochondriac who lived with his overprotective mother. Harry Anderson plays Richie. Richie was the class clown, the goofy guy that you wanted to punch because sometimes he just wouldn't shut up. And then Richard Mazer from like License to Drive and My Girl fame. He played who was he? He is Stan. Stan is just a Jewish Boy Scout. You know, he believes in logic. He doesn't want to believe any of this stuff that's going on, even after he sees it. So I like how when we meet all the characters, we get all of their backstories, and the flow is great. Overall, the child actors are really, really good. Jonathan Brandis, you know, it'd be interesting to see where his career would be now if he hadn't hung himself. I think it was like 2003. But he's really good here overall. Very sympathetic, very likable. He's stuttering Bill. So when he stutters, it seems a little forced. But overall, Jonathan does a really, really good job making Bill a likable and believable leader of their team. I don't really know a lot of the actors who play the children, but I think it's Emily Perkins plays young Bev. I think she went on to do like the Ginger Snaps movies. Overall, very sympathetic, very likable. Sometimes, like I said, with the forced stutter of Bill, her acting can be a little off, but it's just certain scenes. Like, every one of these kids has a scene where they're terrified. And hers is where she's washing her hair, or brushing her hair in her bathroom sink. She hears voices coming from the drain. They're all the dead kids, and then a big balloon comes out, and it explodes. Blood goes everywhere. And she yells for her dad. Her dad comes in, you know, because he's overprotective and physically abusive. We don't know if he's sexually abusive. But he first thing he thinks is a boy's peeping in on her. So he looks around and she says, you know, the sink. And he looks, and of course he's putting his hands on the sink, and his hands are going in the blood that she sees, but he sees nothing. So what I'm getting to is she invites the boys over, and they see all the mess, and they're like, "What the hell happened here?" And then I'm talking about how her acting is kind of off. She's like, "You see it? You see it? That's forced." So other than that, she does a really well job. Seth Green is overall decent as the comic relief, but his character is also going to be the one who doesn't know when to shut up, so you just want to fucking punch him. And that's why they always say beep beep Richie. It's like basically saying shut up Richie. The kid who plays young John Ritter, Ben, I remember him from like the Wonder Years and Rookie of the Year and Heavyweights, a lot of 90s stuff. Again, very likable. All these characters are likable. Eddie, the hypochondriac, even though he whines a lot and, you know, he yells at Seth Green for calling him Eddie Spaghetti. Overall, he's decent. And then Stan, you know, the Boy Scout, overall, again, is really good. There's a couple scenes where I'm just like, eh. But overall. And the thing is, though, they also have good chemistry with each other, which is very important. And then the young actor who plays young Mike, you know, young Tim Reed, doesn't have a huge role. He's kind of like, you know, Winston Zedborn, not just because he's black, from Ghostbusters, comes in halfway through and then joins the group. So he doesn't have a huge role, but he's good at, like, helping the characters learn the history of the town. And again, like I said, they all have great chemistry. There's a side plot where they're being terrified by a bully, or harassed by a bully named Henry Bowers. And that actor is pretty decent for the most part. I mean, Stephen King loves greasers. It's 1960s, so of course he's a greaser with slicked hair. He does have like this one point that goes in front of him, in front of his face, so he looks like one of the Misfits, you know, the band. But he does a pretty decent job being, you know, menacing, being mean, wicked. Whenever Mike's around, he throws the N-word out. Good at terrorizing, Fat Ben, stuff like that. And overall, really decent performance. Don't know who the actor is, so sorry. Now we're gonna get to, before I get to the other adult cast, I'm gonna get to Tim Curry. And he's credited as a special appearance, which makes sense because it's kind of like Silence of the Lambs. Silence of the Lambs is known for Hannibal Lecter and Anthony Hopkins. And he's only in the fucking film for maybe 15 minutes. Well, this is basically a 3-hour film. Tim Curry is basically in the film for 30, 40 at the most. But he's so damn memorable. He's so menacing. And his body language is good at being goofy and stupid as shit, because he's a clown. But then with the flip of a switch, he can turn menacing and scary. Like, I love the scene where all the kids, they've just saved Mike from being chased by Henry Bowers and his gang through this, this rock fight. And they're all resting and looking through this old photo album, this history of Derry. And they come across this old photo, and you see in the background Pennywise. It's Tim Curry. And he's doing flips and somersaults and stuff, and, grabbing on the lamppost and looking goofy. And then he looks at the kids. And then suddenly it switches, and he runs up, and he climbs up the lamppost and looks at him, and then he laughs, and he says, "I'll kill you all. I'll drive you crazy, and then I'll kill you all." He goes from goofy and laughing to that deep guttural voice. And I love it. I love that performance. Very scary, very goofy. Like the scene where he's terrorizing Eddie. There's a shower scene like in school. Eddie's a hypochondriac, doesn't want to take showers with the other boys because, germs. So Pennywise comes out of the drain. And he goes from, being goofy and silly to, menacing and scary with the fangs and everything. So Tim Curry, special appearance or not, hands down, steals this movie. And like I said, whenever you say, hey, think of your first Tim Curry role, if it's not Dr. Frankenfurter, it's Pennywise the Clown. The first half of the movie, like I said, really good at being spooky. I love the imagery. When they're down in the sewers, getting ready to fight Pennywise. Overall, I like just the claustrophobic feel, the colors used. When Georgie comes back, the ghost of Georgie. The little actor who plays him, very creepy, very good. There's some cheesy shit. Don't get me wrong. Pennywise feeds on their fears. He thinks the children taste better when they're afraid. And to fight Pennywise, of course, when they're all afraid, they hold hands in this big cheesy circle, and they say they're not afraid. And smoke's going around. And he's like, "Bill, is that you?" And then you see Bill, and then, "Yes, it's me." "Richie, is that you?" And then it turns and it's Richie, and just that whole circle thing is kind of dumb. The score is very good in the whole sewer scene, though. It helps build the intensity and the creepiness, the creepy vibe. But another scene that I don't like is they don't really Eddie's a hypochondriac, and it's because of his mother's doing. So you find out that basically inside Henry's asthma inhaler, it's just a placebo. Is what they say. It's basically water with some medicine in it to make it taste like it. So Pennywise has grabbed Stan. He's going to eat him. So Eddie runs up and sprays his inhaler, and he says this is battery acid. And then, of course, Pennywise melts. Like, he grabs his face, and there's like this really cool melting effect. I don't know if there really is battery acid in it, because earlier they have like a bonding moment, and they all take a breath out of the inhaler. Or it hurts Pennywise because he's no longer afraid. Kind of a different way to interpret it. I kind of wish that I had a more explanation. When they finally defeat Pennywise, granted it's 1990, made-for-TV movie, but the stop-motion effects are really bad. I mean, I like when they take some silver earrings, because in one scene, Pennywise takes the form of the Michael Landon werewolf from I Was a Teenage Werewolf. So they assume, Silver killed the monsters in movies. It's probably going to kill Pennywise. Beverly pulls the slingshot, hits Pennywise in the head. Some light shines out. Really cool effect. But then he jumps and does like a flip to land in a sewer drain, and he gets sucked down the sewer drain, and it's a really cringeworthy effect. And even though it is 1990, I'm just like, that's bad. But there are some good effects. I like because Henry Bowers is also in the sewers chasing the children. When Belch gets taken care of, Belch is one of his henchmen. He's pulled into a drain pipe and folded and slowly dragged away. That's a really cool effect. Overall, part 1 of Stephen King's It, really well done. I won't say how the way it ends with this cliffhanger, but it deals with Stan, Richard Mazur's character, the Jewish Boy Scout, when he gets his phone call. And then you'd have to wait a week to find out. So it's good that, I got this where I can watch the whole thing from beginning to end. So overall, part 1, great performances from the kids overall. They hit and miss in little parts. I love the way it's cut, where we meet each character individually, and the flow is great. Tim Curry is fantastic in the first half. Overall, highly recommend part 1. Now we're getting into part 2. And it does lose a little bit of steam. Think of it like Full Metal Jacket. First half, when they're in boot camp, fucking fantastic. Balls to the wall. They hit you with every fucking intense moment that they can. And then when they get to Vietnam, actually, it's just kind of... the air is like out of the balloon. No pun intended. It's like, Stephen King's It is Full Metal Jacket with Tim Curry as the drill sergeant. But after rewatching that, I will say it's not as bad. Well, it wasn't bad to begin with, but it's not as slow to remember. It's just not as intense. The adult actors are fantastic. I mean, we got a little bit of a taste of them in the first one, but everyone's good. Harry Anderson as the adult Richie, just like his Seth Green counterpart. Funny for the most part, but there are times when you just want to grab him by his neck and say, shut up. I love the wimpy Eddie. Eddie's still a wimp. I love when he, at the end of the film, just like at the end of the first part, he's no longer the wimp. Great scene, likable character. Richard Mazur, not in it very much. And I'll leave it at that. Annette O'Toole, kind of like her counterpart. Overall, really, really good, except for some scenes where she's got to emote fear, and you're just like, you could have done better. You've been acting for a while now. Tim Reed. Tim Reed's my favorite performance. As adult Mike. He's there to bring the group together, to convince them to stay, because a lot of them are like, you know what, I made a promise 30 years ago. We finally came back to Derry, and that's all we're going to do. Because you know what, I don't want to die. And it's him doing a great job convincing them to stay, telling them how serious it is. And I buy it 100%. Where am I at now? John Ritter? John Ritter's fucking great. He's not goofy John Ritter. He's not Three's Company or Stay Tuned or anything like that. If you've seen John Ritter in like Lifetime movies, my wife watches a lot of Lifetime dramas. I've seen him in a couple, and he can do drama. He's really good. 90% in this, but like when he's trying to get all lovey-dovey with Beverly, he had to work it, but I don't know if that was just the vibe coming off of Annette O'Toole. Then we got Henry Thomas. John Boy from the Waltons. Overall, really good. Likeable. You still believe him as the leader of the group. His stutter, when it comes back, doesn't seem as overly forced as Jonathan Brandis did. And this group of adults also overall has a good chemistry. I liked it. And the reason, and once again, Tim Curry, he's not in it as much in the second half that he is in the first half. And I think that's why it loses a lot of steam. I mean, there's a scene where I love the scene where he meets Bill again and he's digging some graves for the Losers Club. That's a fun scene. I love when Ben, John Ritter, is just in a taxi and he drives past the Barrens. The Barrens is where they were kids and they used to hang out and like make dams and stuff. And you just see Tim Curry holding the balloon, acting like he's, he wants a ride, hitchhiking, and then he just goofy shit like that. It's fucking Tim Curry being fantastic. Great scene. And like I said, he can be menacing in some scenes and he can be funny as shit, like in that scene. And then, of course, my wife's favorite scene is when Harry Anderson, Richie, is at the library looking for Mike. And Tim Curry's there, and he's just going ape shit, being totally fucking goofy. And he's got noisemakers, swinging the cranky thing around. It's like he's Tim Curry as Pennywise being goofy on cocaine. And, he's throwing out these one-liners, and it's funny, intercut with him yelling and screaming, saying, "Get out of town, we'll kill you," in that deep voice. And then back to him being goofy. So it's a great, great performance in this. The problem is, it's not a lot compared to what we had in the first. Henry Bowers is back. Here's where a lot of the problems happen. Here's where one of the main problems happen. I'm going to be probably talking. I've been talking for 20 minutes, and this is a 3-hour movie, so I got a lot to say. Henry Bowers is now in the psych ward. He saw his friends get murdered in part 1, and then he looked at it in its a natural form, which is like this bright light. They call it dead lights. His hair is turned all completely white, and he's in the nut house because apparently he went crazy after getting out of the sewers, and he took credit for all the child murders, whatever. And he's in the psych ward, and he sees the ghost of Belch. Belch was one of his buddies, and obviously it's Pennywise, of course. And Belch, Pennywise, whatever, is saying how Henry's got to break out and kill the Losers Club, which is, I don't remember if I mentioned that, but that's what they were called when they were kids. They called themselves the Losers Club, or the Lucky Seven. And he's not a prison warden, but like the guy in charge of watching, the crazies at that shift. He hears Henry talking, and Henry gets up, and Belch says, "I'll take care of it." So Henry's walking towards the warden. I'm just gonna call him the warden, and he's threatening to kick the shit out of Henry, and you think something intense is going to happen because this guy's a dead man. He sees Henry walking up to him, and then suddenly you see the clown foot stick out, and then you see like the clown bodysuit, and you're like, okay, is Pennywise going to bite his throat or something like that? And then Pennywise has the head of a dog. I don't know dog breed, so I don't know if it's Doberman or Rottweiler or Pitbull, whatever. But you're like, what the fuck? Really? A huge letdown. And then Tommy Wallace does some slow-mo shots. Tommy Lee Wallace does some slow-mo shots, and we see the dog going close to the camera, and then we see a point of view shot of the dog, and you just see the actor playing the warden slowly for longer than that in a slow-mo scene while the dog's barking at the regular speed. So I'm just like, what the fuck is that shit? Horrible. Major letdown. But I like the guy who plays Henry Bowers here too. He finally gets in, he catches up to the Losers Club at their hotel. He attacks Mike, and this guy's very menacing. He throws out the N-word again, which is surprising for 1990s TV. Mike is injured. They take out Henry, and I'm just like, I wanted more Henry, because I believe that this Henry could be a menace. So there's another disappointment. There's a scene where John Ritter's making out with Beverly, and he looks and he sees Beverly from behind, and she's wearing clown pants, and it just looks awkward. Like their chemistry is kind of awkward, like when they kiss and stuff, but then it turns to, once again, Tim Curry saving the day. He looks at him and says, "Kiss me, fat boy," and laughs. So he saves that. Once again, it's Tim Curry. But there's not enough. And now let's get to the the final part, which everyone bitches about. Now, like I said, I haven't read the book. I know a lot about it, though. So apparently this happens in the book. But even fans of the book are complaining about this. The Losers Club have finally reunited. They're in the sewers, going to track down Pennywise. You know, you expect them to be looking for Pennywise the Clown. And then they find out that Bill's wife Audra has been kidnapped. And down in its lair. And you see her up in the ceiling, and she's wrapped in some spider webs, you know, along with some other bodies. So you're wondering, okay, she's in some spider webs, but is that just part of its lair? And then you see it, Pennywise. Well, I won't call it Pennywise. You see it in its final form, and it's a giant fucking spider. And I guess that's how it is in the book. Whatever. It's just kind of a... We want another huge confrontation with Pennywise, and we get this fucking spider. Why? It's a fine scene. The spider looks okay for 1990 TV movie. Not all the losers make it out alive. It's a very sympathetic scene. I liked it a lot. When it finally gets, you know, the silver shot at it again, not a great special effect. But then it gets weakened. I like how, this is a major spoiler, eventually after it gets hit with the silver that Beverly shoots, all the surviving losers that are down there run up and rip its fucking heart out. I like that. That's brutal. You see a little bit of the heart being pulled out by what's the fuck is his name? Richard Thomas, John Boy, Bill. And you see a little bit of the heart, and then of course, because it's in the fucking 1990s, you cut to their shadows and they lift up the heart so you can't really see it. So that's another letdown, but you see that little bit of it. So it's nice. And then the end, they all go their separate ways. Bill's wife Audra is catatonic because of, you know, seeing the deadlights. The way he revives her is kind of stupid. But the end. So, overall, Stephen King's It, I still have to highly recommend. Even though it loses a lot of steam, and that's a fucking, how do you say it, cliche, with the second part. The first part is so strong. I love the child performances. Overall, the way it's shot, the way it's intercut, the flow of it. Even though it loses... Oh, another thing I liked. In the second half, the creepy imagery. I love the scene where they're at the Chinese restaurant and they're eating their fortune cookies, you know, after they're reminiscing. And again, for 1990s network TV, when they're opening up the fortune cookies, you have some blood gushings and some eyeballs and some chicken embryos or whatever the fuck it is. Really cool imagery, really creepy imagery. And even though it does, I'm not going to fucking say it again, you know, it's not as good as the first half, I gotta highly, highly recommend Stephen King's It. The second half was not as bad as I remembered. It doesn't drag as much. It's just like Full Metal Jacket. You get hit so hard with the first half. The second half, there's nothing to... There's no way it can be equal to, especially with the length of the film. But overall, the performances are great by the children and the adults. Tim Curry is fucking great as Pennywise. Pennywise, you know, is now a cultural icon because of this film, more so than the book. Overall, great score, great tension. Yeah, Tommy Lee Wallace, once again, gotta recommend another one of your films. Highly, highly enjoy Stephen King's It, the 1990 miniseries. Go check it out if you haven't. Yeah, so thank you for watching. Thank you for staying with me for over 29 minutes. Hopefully I didn't ramble too much trying to explain a 3-hour miniseries here. Please check out my other stuff, blah, blah, blah. I go through this spiel all the time. click the bell or not. Tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell Pennywise. Yeah. Cheers, and you'll float too.